Hello, everybody. Welcome back to This Day in History. It is June 17th, 2024. It is a very overcast day. It rained overnight. And I don't know, maybe it's just why I'm running late for the gym. It's currently 11:30 a.m. I try to leave about an hour ago. Wanted to leave an hour ago. I don't know, it's just kind of one of those blah days, but it's, is what it is. It's kind of a muck day, really, but it could be worse. I mean, it could be dropping sheets of rain, but it's not. It's like, it's the aftermath, after it's rained and it's still a little gloomy and, everything's trying to dry out, but, it's one of those things where it'll probably take a couple days. So, noticing the camera angle is a little bit different, if you might notice. The cell phone clip that holds my phone in place while I drive broke yesterday, and I had to get a new one. And I think the jury's still out, but I think this new clip that I have is probably better than the one that I had before, because it holds it in place a lot smoother, and I don't know. So that's what happens when you go to a TA truck stop, and they have a plethora of stuff to get, and well, I found one to my liking. I actually wanted to get one that kind of hangs from the rear view mirror, or suctions onto the windshield, but on the other end it's magnetic, and I have a phone case that's plastic, and the magnet doesn't stick to the phone because the plastic creates that barrier, and so I mean that's useless. So I actually need like something that clips to the phone, but I want that clip to actually like either mount to the rearview mirror or mount to the windshield instead of the air vent. But it's working, so yeah. Now that I got off on that little tirade, hi, welcome to This Day in History. It is, like I said, June 17th, and we have some interesting stuff, including the origin of the Taj Mahal building in India. We'll get into that, and that's kind of a tragic story, really. But it's not only is it tragic, but it's it's a wonderful testament as to why the Taj Mahal was built. I think it's pretty cool, despite the tragedy. But at any rate, let's get into the birthdays. Again, looking here, there's only one person on this list whose name I even recognize. And yeah. So let's get into it. 1871. James Weldon Johnson was a poet, was a diplomat, was an anthropologist. He was an anthropologist of African American culture. He was born on this day in 1871. In 1882, Igor Stravinsky was born. He was a Russian composer. 1898, M.C. Escher was a Dutch artist. He was born on this day. 1900, one of the biggest scumbags of the earth, one of Hitler's henchmen, Martin Bormann, was born on this day in 1900. So that means that prick is 124 years old. And thankfully he's not among the living to harm anyone ever again. A little background on Bormann is that he was one of Hitler's henchmen that kind of wormed his way to the top, weaseled his way through. All those guys vied for the top position to be Hitler's right hand man. But Bormann was the only one who was successful at it. And mind you, Bormann was basically just like an aide de camp, right? He was an administrative assistant at best, right? He didn't hold any political office. He wasn't like Joseph Goebbels, who was in charge of propaganda. He wasn't like Hermann Goering, who was in charge of the Luftwaffe, which is, German Air Force. He wasn't in charge of the SS, like, Hermann Himmler, or not Hermann Himmler, Heinrich Himmler. No, and he wasn't the chief architect like Albert Speer, which, that's a different one right there. The guy is allowed in the inner cabal because he was the chief architect, but he was sentenced to, some serious hard labor because, just because he was a part of that cabal. He was sentenced to the hard labor for the war crimes, the final solution. And I don't know that Albert Speer actually had anything to do with that decision. Not quite clear if Martin Bormann did either. But getting back to Martin Bormann, what he did was that he ingratiated himself to the point where he was such a yes man to Hitler that, he was almost like a personal assassin of sorts. Martin Bormann would make stuff happen. Martin Bormann kept himself very close to Hitler. Martin Bormann would, character assassinate, his opponents if he thought that they were going to wrestle, any kind of perceived power from him. It got to the point where they're toward the end of the war, all of Hitler's top guys are kind of scattering. They're all, they see the writing on the wall, and they're getting out while the getting is good. And Bormann ended up becoming number 2 guy. He became the number 2 guy right before the end. And Hitler kills himself, yada yada yada. The next guy who would have been in charge of the whole shebang would have been Martin Bormann, whose birthday is today. I take that back. Both birthdays from 1943 are people I know I know of them. I know who they are. I know what they are. Blah blah blah. So 2 people, not one. So 1943 we find it's the birthday of American politician Newt Gingrich. He was very popular in the 90s for having been like one of the biggest Republican thorns in President Bill Clinton's side. They were adversarial, yet Gingrich borrowed a bunch of money from Clinton to go pay off some old debts, like tax debts, I think it was. So as much as they were political rivals, they seemed to be decent friends. I'm not in the habit of loaning money out to my rivals. I don't know. The other 1943 birthday, both these guys, both Americans, are both born same day. Barry Manilow. Barry Manilow was a pop singer, songwriter. He's mostly known for his romantic melodies. I've never been a big Barry Manilow fan. I always liked the George Carlin joke. He was a stand-up comic. I always liked the joke that George Carlin said about Barry Manilow, was that you had to be brain dead to listen to Barry Manilow. I'm sure he's a wonderful human being, and happy birthday to him. His music's not my cup of tea. But I'll just leave it at that. 1987, Kendrick Lamar, I don't know who this is, but apparently it's an American musician. Anyway, Kendrick was born on this day, 1987. Happy birthday. So, I talked about a tragedy. I talked about, India, the Taj Mahal. So, Mumtaz Mahal, that was the wife of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. Okay, she dies on this day in 1631, and it's tragic that the wife dies. But what makes it more tragic is that she died during childbirth. Now, I don't know if the child survived or if both mother and child died. I'm not sure. But the emperor had, to celebrate her life, to commemorate her, and to memorialize her, he had the Taj Mahal built and erected in her memory. And that's why it's called the Taj Mahal, because it's actually named after her, as a dedication to her. So while the gesture is super sweet, and it's really cool that he did that, it was born out of a tragedy, and that's unfortunate. He never wished that on anyone. So that happened on this day in 1631. In 1775, it's the Battle of Bunker Hill, and the Battle of Bunker Hill is taking place during the Siege of Boston, and it's on this day that colonials would clash with British regular troops. We say regulars because the British had some elite units that were, forces to be reckoned with. Like the Dragoons were a nasty bunch. The Rangers were a nasty bunch. I think that's where that's the genesis of our U.S. Army Rangers. They get, it's their tie is to the British Rangers from that time period during the Revolutionary War. So that's what happened on this day, is the Battle of Bunker Hill. And I knew a guy once who said he'd went to Bunker Hill, and he said it's not much. It's like a 50-foot hill. It's like you walk up 50 feet, you're there at the top of the hill. And because, modern society and being what it is, it had grown so much that what they did is they carved out one city square block and left it untouched, and that's Bunker Hill. And then you look at Bunker Hill, and then you see that it is completely surrounded by a cityscape. So I guess that's Bunker Hill. But I don't know, I've never been to Massachusetts. I do want to go there. I do want to see New England. So perhaps one day I'll do that. 1930. So you got to remember, this is like we're knee deep into the Great Depression. And at this point, the Great Depression isn't just a U.S. problem. It's a global problem. Now, we talked about this yesterday, where in the global economic problem was so bad that, Germany's debt, reparation debt had to be forgiven because there's just no way they could pay it, Well, and that was, 1933. Well, this is 3 years earlier. The U.S. imposes the protectionist Smoot-Hawley tariff, or Smoot-Hawley tariff. And essentially what that is that they raised the cost of tariffs up 20%. Now, I'm no economist, but I understand what they were trying to do. They were trying to raise the tariffs so that they could bring more revenue into our economy and boost our economy, in the hopes that if it boosted our economy, it was going to trickle down and boost everyone else's economy. The problem is that, and this was all part of, FDR's grand strategy on how to deal with this depression, it kind of backfired, right? It didn't really help us out any. If anything, it probably, again, I'm no economist, but I suspect that it probably conflated the issue and probably made the Great Depression last longer than it would have if they just kind of, I don't know, did something else. But at any rate, so they raised tariffs 20%, and that causes an issue, because obviously if we were hurting financially and we were getting to be the economic powerhouse of the world, if we're hurting financially, all the other people that we do trade with that aren't as well-to-do as we aren't doing well financially, which means they're not able to pay. Okay, look, a tariff is what is there's import tax, export tax, right? Tariff is import, right? Which means, right? I think tariff is import, which means they pay the tax on the goods that they're bringing in, and then we turn around. I don't know. At any rate, it's a tax that didn't go well. It didn't help boost the economy. It actually further hurt it. So that's what happened in 1930. 10 years later, 1940, the Soviet Red Army invades Latvia. And actually, well, I love how they... So Britannica.com used the word incorporated, right? The Soviet Union incorporated Latvia into the USSR. No, they annexed it. They rolled in there and they took over and they said, "You're ours now. You are now Soviets. You are now part of the Soviet Union." And then, and that's how the Soviet Union expanded its territory. It was like, we're not even giving you a choice. You're ours now. So it's like it's like a stalker on a first date. So bad. 1944, on this day, 1944, Iceland just simply declared itself to be a republic. I think I'm wanting to say that Iceland was technically land owned by it was either the Dutch or the Danes. I can't remember which. But in 1944, they just we're a republic now. That's all it said. It didn't go into any more detail. 1972. On this day, June 17th, 1972, there's this little thing called the Watergate break-in. And Watergate was a building. It was an apartment complex / office building setting kind of thing. And so what happened is that you got some guys who broke into the Democratic National Convention, or the Democratic Party, the DNC. They break into their headquarters there at the Watergate building. And this is interesting because, we always heard about Watergate when I was in history class in high school. Watergate is brought up every time you do an orientation or it's part of the curriculum when you're getting certified to be a security officer, because how did these guys get caught? It was a security officer. Security officer just happens to notice the lights flashing. They were using flashlights, and they were looking for. The official story is that they were looking for. They heard that the DNC had some dirt on President Nixon that they were about to release to bury him in his re-election bid, and so these guys went into the Watergate building, broke into the DNC headquarters, They were specifically looking for this information to destroy it so that they couldn't use it. The security guard sees the flashlights flashing around, notifies the police. All 4 guys are caught. Come to find out, all 4 guys were like CIA spooks, and they all have ties, to various different things that our government has been involved in. Now, E. Howard Hunt was one of the guys that was captured, or he was taken into custody. He was one of the 4 guys. On his deathbed, he basically had said that the reason why they were at Watergate is because the DNC had got information on Nixon in regard to the Kennedy assassination, and it was their job to go make that disappear. Take that for what it is. This guy also said that he was involved in Dallas in 1963, and that he had confirmed that the assassination of President Kennedy was in fact it was a CIA hit. It was the CIA trying to protect itself from being dismantled like Kennedy wanted to do. And Watergate kind of had a tie to it because Nixon was involved with the Bay of Pigs thing, Bay of Pigs scandal under Kennedy, and like he had a direct tie to that, and the DNC was going to expose that. Although that seems a little weak to me, I don't know. But factually speaking, what happened was 4 CIA guys, on behalf of the administration, break into the office to try to, either plant bugs or retrieve certain information so that Nixon would win his re-election, which he did. He did win his re-election and won fairly successfully despite this scandal. But the investigation of that arbitrary and the trial and all that eventually would lead to Nixon being taken to task, and that he was going to be he was impeached. They were going to start the impeachment process on him, and then he resigned. He's the only president who's ever resigned from his office. Gerald Ford took over for him as because Gerald Ford ran as his vice president. No sooner than when Gerald Ford was sworn in as the next president, he gave a presidential pardon to Nixon for any illegal, i.e. wrongdoing that he may have been involved in, which basically that just put the kibosh on the investigation in one fell swoop. Giving him a presidential pardon basically killed the investigation, which halted the criminal investigation side of the impeachment process. So that happened in 1972. We move forward 2012, and I didn't know this, and if I heard about it, it didn't really click to me. But so in the 90s, early 90s, it was 1990, I think. So Rodney King became a household name, and what brief on that is Rodney King was a black man in LA who was pulled over for speeding on his motorcycle, and at some point the issue really got out of hand and escalated, and these 4 LA County cops beat the crap out of him. I mean, nightsticked him, everything. They beat him, and they kept saying, well, we beat him because he was resisting arrest, and there was a bystander who happened to be videotaping, like old school VHS camcorder, they're recording the whole thing. And so they recorded Rodney King getting the crap kicked out of him. Rodney King had a famous quote, "Can't we all just get along?" By the time Rodney went to trial, he was big, he was buff and all that, and well, he had spent quite a bit of time in the county lockup, and so he was banging weights, and so he looked a lot bigger and a lot more imposing than he was when, you know, these 4 cops were kicking the crap out of him. But they, and all 4 of those police officers eventually lost their jobs. They eventually went to prison themselves for the violation of his civil rights. Being a cop's son, I can never condone that sort of behavior, right? I mean, it's one thing if someone's being combative and, you know, and there's legitimate resisting of arrest. I mean, you know, you have to employ a modicum of pain to get the compliance. I get that. But what this was over the line. I mean, like, I watched this video and it sickened me that these cops would take turns with their nightsticks, the old PR-24s, in martial arts world they're called tonfas, but it's the stick with the handle, right? And they're twirling, and like these 4 guys, they took turns, and it was like, you know, I mean, I didn't watch all 15-20 minutes of it, whatever it was, but you know, the clips that made the news junkets there, these guys would take turns. There's, you know, one guy's sitting there twirling his baton, and when, oh, your turn, and he would come down face, and he would run up to Rodney, who's on the ground, and granted, yes, he is trying to crawl away, but you would too if you're getting beaten mercilessly like that. And so, you know, he wasn't going to stay still and continue to get beaten. You know, that's just basic human nature, you know, the fight or flight. He didn't fight back. But he did try to get away from the assault, and so that spurred them on to keep beating him more. But yeah, they would take turns, you know, just he's on the ground and they're whap, 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 you know, and so it was one of those things where, you know, it was just unnecessary. It led to another round of Watts riots down in LA. It, you know, just, it was a powder keg. At any rate, the whole point why I bring up Rodney King is because it's on this day in 2012 that he is found dead in his swimming pool. And I don't know how I missed that. I don't know how I never heard, I don't remember ever hearing about him being found dead. So I don't know what the circumstances were. I don't know, you know, was it murder? Was it a retaliation for, you know, the whole Rodney King beating situation back in 1990? You know, I don't know. I don't know. And the last thing, the most the featured thing is, it is on this day in 1994 that O.J. Simpson, NFL great, actor, football player, Orenthal J. Simpson, he's arrested for the double murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ronald Goldman, her friend. They were murdered. He was arrested and the stupid thing about this day is, like, you know, the media hyped this up as like this white Bronco police chase, right? And Al Cowlings, which was another football player, friend of his, was driving this white Bronco that he was in. And so, this breaking news, when they went to go arrest him, like, he's down the freeway, they're driving down this freeway, and you see a whole sea of police officers chasing him, you know, like, in pursuit. Yet, this white Bronco was only doing 45 miles an hour down I-5. I think it was I-5 is where they're at. Down the interstate. He's only doing 45 miles an hour. OJ just wanted to go home. For whatever reason, I don't know. He wasn't really trying to flee. Al was just taking him home for whatever reason. And I remember they followed this whole thing. News choppers followed from the air. They had the news cameras there at OJ's residence. So Al drives right into the complex. and all these police officers, all these squad cars come in right behind him. And it wasn't much of a standoff. He went into his house, and he was in the house like maybe, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, I don't know. But then he was brought out in handcuffs. And then he was eventually acquitted of the charges. Johnny Cochran had said it best, if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. And there was just, say what you will about that. OJ just recently passed away, so I remember my aunt watching the trial and wanting, because OJ was a football hero of hers, and she was wanting so much for him to be innocent. I think a lot of people wanted him to be innocent. There had been talk about, the black community would be up in riots again if they convicted him. So there is this notion that the jury didn't want to cause a third round of Watts riots in LA, so they acquitted him of the charges. I don't know. I mean, I don't pretend to know what it was they were thinking. I really didn't watch much of the trial. I watched a little bit of it, but it was on this day in 1994 that he's arrested, but it was a big ordeal, because the police chase, which really wasn't a police chase, it really was more like a police escort, really. And but yeah, that's what happened on this day. And that concludes this day in history, and we've gone over 30 minutes. Wow, I'm sorry. Hopefully you were entertained. But that is this day in history. Take it for what it is. And be well, be blessed, have a great day. Take care, and we'll do this again tomorrow for June 18th. All right? See ya.